Welcome to the Health Woman Podcast. Today is Thursday, August 27th, 2020, Yoga Week, Day 4. Today, I'm joined by Jamie and Scott Harig to talk about Ashtanga Yoga. Jamie and Scott run the AOP, or Ashtanga Open Practice, at Pure Yoga in New York City. My wife, Michal, became a regular in their practice a few years ago and was there about 6 days a week until Corona took over. Jamie and Scott explain what exactly is Ashtanga Yoga, how they got into it, how it's unique, and why it's both challenging but also an amazing way for anyone to improve their yoga practice. Tomorrow, I am super excited to be joined by my daughter, Kira Fox, also a yoga instructor, to talk about yoga, giving back. That'll be Day 5 of Yoga Week. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Welcome to today's episode of Healthful Woman, a podcast designed to explore topics in women's health at all stages of life. I'm your host, Dr. Nathan Fox, an OBGYN and maternal fetal medicine specialist practicing in New York City. At Healthful Woman, I speak with leaders in the field to help you learn more about women's health, pregnancy, and wellness. All right, I'm here with Jamie and Scott Harig, who are yoga instructors and masters of Ashtanga yoga practice, and they're currently my wife's physical and spiritual advisors, it seems to be. How you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Doing pretty good.
Welcome aboard. Yeah, so I got you guys as you've escaped to Vermont during the quarantine. How has that all been going for you guys just in general? I mean, you went from having this, studio practice with people come into your room every day, and then everyone's like, go home, close the door, close the windows. How's that working?
It's been
a pretty huge shock at first. We, basically, but in terms of exercise, I went from averaging 10 miles a day of walking all the way down to 1 or 2.
Yeah, so there was 2 months in there where we really locked down. We're right in the Midtown, New York City, Upper West Side actually, but close to Midtown. He went out to the store. I pretty much didn't leave the apartment for 2 months with the kids.
Right.
So that was a huge, huge change. And it was slow at first. The studio, we got word, I think it was about 2 weeks before it happened.
Right.
It's a big yoga program that Ashtanga Yoga is very physical. When you're in the room, there's a lot of assisting going on where you're hands-on with people. So about 2 weeks before we closed, they said, stop touching.
Right.
So we started to have to figure out how to do things without touching. And then it became, now we're doing it on Zoom without touching.
Yeah, we basically took our living room and turned it into a yoga studio so that we could start doing sort of platform classes for what we call the Ashtanga Open Practice, or the AOP, so that people can, join us for whatever amount they can afford, and they can take classes whenever they want, whether they're live or we pretty much record all of the classes we do.
Yeah, we record. You can come live or you can do the recording on your own. But yeah, it's been a humongous
change. Yeah.
This everyone being at home and the lockdown, I mean, there's a silver lining, obviously, in that it sort of opened up people's opportunities to exercise from home and do yoga from home and have, there's more people who may have access to you now that it's online versus in person. But okay, so you sort of increase your width, but the depth is reduced by so much because you, like you said, you don't have that personalized attention. You can't actually go up and adjust them. You don't have that. Just being next to someone is so much more motivating potentially than seeing them on a screen. And so it's hard. I mean, I can't imagine for you guys when you're used to what you're doing.
The hardest thing I think is we don't have that many, but it's the newer people coming in, which it is a great thing that it is super accessible right now. So you could come on and potentially with our site, if you're paying $12 a month, it's pretty affordable, the lowest, and then it's what you can pay. So you can pay more. But the new people coming in, some of the people who have been with us for years, there's such a community feeling. So even on Zoom, it's kind of come into the Zoom where it's like people are watching and helping each other in the open practice sessions, and it does still have a community feel, but it's a lot harder to introduce a new person into a community when you're not seeing them in person.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I remember when I had like a week of vacation and I came with Michal to practice every day, and I did Ashtanga, and it was basically, I was like one-on-one with you, Scott, pretty much every day of that week. And I can't imagine how I could have possibly done anything. I mean, I guess I could have done something, but it just would have been so much harder to do that over a Zoom session rather than in person. And so, for Michal, like, okay, like it's different, but since she does it on her own so much, it would maybe reduce it like, I don't know, 10 to 20%, but for me, it would have reduced it like 90%, the effectiveness.
The other thing too, though, Nate, is that at first it was really, really hard for us, starting from teaching with our hands to teaching with our eyes, basically. Well, not that we did before. So it was rough, but now as time has gone by, I feel like we've gotten really good at it.
Yeah.
We're starting to figure out how
It's getting easier for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have 15, images on your computer screen. You can watch everyone.
That's the thing that's unique about Ashtanga is everybody memorizes the practice.
Right.
You do have these lead classes that are similar to your like vinyasa class that you would take, where you're calling the poses off and everyone's doing the same thing. But the majority of the practice is self-practice. You're just doing it with a teacher overseeing. So
Right.
as a teacher right now, when it gets above 15 Zoom boxes, you have 15 different little boxes of people doing different things. And then the more people you get, the smaller the Zoom box gets.
Right.
It's a little, it's a new challenge.
So
Yeah.
we partner a lot up through that too. I've also noticed though, as well as getting better with the teaching on the online, is also the numbers. You can tell that people are starting to enjoy it more and more because the numbers are starting to grow in the classroom, which is really nice to see.
Yeah.
And seeing people who haven't seen in 4 or 5 months and like, oh hey, it's so good to see you.
Yeah. I think that people enjoy it more. And I think also when this first started, everyone's like, all right, I'll take 2 months off and then everything will go back to normal. And then people realize, well, it's going to be quite a while. I got to, like, if I'm not doing this online, I'm not doing it at all. And they realize I just got to jump in and do it. And listen, I think one of the advantages is this is what you do. I mean, this is what you do. And so, yeah, it's a different medium in which you're doing it. But ultimately, the practice is something you guys are experts at. And so, you're going to be able to adjust. And it's just about everyone else figuring out how to adjust with you and just move forward until this ends, whenever the hell that's going to be.
Right.
Yeah. But and then, and that's one of the, you could say one of the backbones of Ashtanga Yoga is teaching students how they can teach themselves the yoga. So they get to the point where they don't necessarily need a teacher all the time. Where
Right.
They can practice on their own.
Teach a man to fish.
There's one specific posture that that is very commonly held, and it's a very difficult posture. And we've had about 5 people since in the past month really do it on their own at home. And I'm not sure if that all would have happened in the room the way it happened at home, because it was a lot of energy that happened on the computer. One person saw the other person do it. Okay, I'm going to try. You could feel it kind of spread. It has been fun. I'm not sure if Zoom yoga will go away when in-person yoga comes back.
Yeah, I think it's going to be sort of a fusion.
Yeah.
Listen, that makes a lot of sense. We've seen that. It's totally different realm, but we've seen that in medicine. A lot of the visits became virtual, which similarly has more accessibility, wider reach. It's more availability potentially, and there's a definite downside. You can't do physical examination. You don't get that eye-to-eye contact. It's maybe less personal. And so, but because of the advantages, I agree. That's something that's going to stay in some capacity for most people's doctor visits or medical practices. And hopefully we'll be able to synthesize the best of both worlds to end up in a better place, certainly better than now, but in a better place in general, that when this all, is behind us, hopefully we'll be able to take the good parts of what we learned and sort of just add them into what we had before.
We also have another bonus is we have people from other countries that were with us years ago that have come back. We had somebody this morning from California. There's multiple people all over this country.
Right. California is not a different country. You're aware, even though it may seem that way to those of us in New York. I think they're still in the same union of these states.
True. But we have a girl from Guatemala. I mean, there's a bunch of people from all over that we hadn't seen in years.
So just to take a step back, how did you guys get into yoga? Just yoga. Forget about Ashtanga for now. Just how did you get into yoga initially? What's your story?
My story is kind of funny, but I was actually started dating. This was right after I got out of racing mountain bikes. I started dating a yoga teacher. So she, talked me to go into her classes, and then I'd go to her classes, and I would watch, other people in the room doing things I couldn't do. And at the time, I was before the yoga, I was a professional mountain bike racer, so it was very competitive. right? So it's this, I got to be able to do this. If this guy can do this, I can do this. So then I just started practicing. Yeah.
How long ago was this?
Oh my God. We figured this out the other day. I want to say it was like 1997.
Okay. All right. So that's the 20 plus years ago, if I did my
Yeah.
math right. Yeah. And Jamie, what about you?
His story. Do you want to finish? I guess that goes into the Ashtanga part. So I started, I think it was about 1999. I was a dancer as a kid, did a lot of musical theater, and my hips, I was, 18, 19, and I had really bad tendonitis in my hips. And I remember being that age, being like, oh my gosh, I guess I'm just going to feel like this for the rest of my life. And being, I love dancing, but I was pretty sad about that I was in so much pain at such a young age. And the first thing I did was a Bikram series, which was kind of nice because I was used to having the mirror in front of me and looking at my own form. That was a little similar. And then the next thing I did was a teacher from Jivamukti was teaching 2 classes a week at a Gold's Gym. This was probably around 2001 at that point. And it was a really dark room. And that was the first time I think that, I wasn't looking in the mirror. It wasn't about the form. And I really went inside and fell in love with the practice because it was physical and I was still using that physicality that I'd fallen in love with dance. But I went inside and started facing a lot of my own inner demons and then healing my body. My hips, I don't have problems. I really, between that class and the welting session I did at the same time, that really helped my hips. And I can say right now at the age of 39 that I'm as pain-free as I've ever been in my entire life. And I do some crazy yoga things. I have a lot of my body, but it's great. I'm like this age and I'm still having a blast.
And how did you two meet?
Jamie was my yoga student.
Got it. And did you...
I walked into, so this is kind of funny because I wasn't really, I do a lot of crazy physical yoga now. Up until right before we met, I think Instagram yoga started becoming like a thing. And I saw all these images of people doing, handstands and foot behind the head and all this sort of stuff. And I'd been doing yoga for years at that point. And I'm like, why can't I do this? Like, I didn't care that much, but I was more just like, I've been doing it for so many years. Why didn't I learn that yet? And so, and I think it was probably Kino McGregor, and I was like, Ashtanga. I'm like, what is this Ashtanga thing? So that's really what brought me into Ashtanga open practice I had done my research. So I walk in, most people don't come in like this, I don't think. I walked in and I did my first day and he's like, when will I see you again? And I'm like, well, I'll be here 6 days a week. I'll take off on Saturday or whatever day. And then I took the oil bath. They came in the next day after the day off and I was like all slicked up in oil. He's like, you really did your research here.
you're jumping right in. And this was at the Pure Ashtanga. This was at the Pure AOP?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And Scott, how did you get into Ashtanga? I know you said you entered yoga purely out of spite because you didn't want other people being able to do it when you couldn't. And then once you sort of got past that, when did you get into Ashtanga?
Long story short, I was supposed to meet, her name's Stephanie, at a yoga place in Boulder. And I ended up in the wrong studio in Boulder. It happened to be Richard Freeman's studio. So I walked into the room and it was a Mysore room, which is the same as the open practice. And, Mary walked up to me and sat me down. And next thing I know, Richard was working with me. And I noticed a lot of time had gone by and my girlfriend's time was not there. And I realized I was probably in the wrong space. But I completely fell in love with it. It was amazing.
Well, and did you get certified as a yoga instructor before you did the Ashtanga, or that was sort of, you got more into yoga and you sort of did it at the same time?
No, that was after.
So you're already like, doing yoga regularly, you're a yoga instructor, and then you got turned on to Ashtanga. 6
months into me practicing yoga, I met this guy who wanted to open up a yoga studio. This was in Colorado, and it was the Dharma Center.
Mm-hmm.
He told me, he asked me if I wanted to be business partners with him. Because at the time, the doctor told me that, I can't race anymore. I've had too many concussions. So I was like, sure, that sounds great. I worked with Frank and we got the studio ready to open and stuff. And then I was going through a breakup and Frank told me that because this was the morning that we were supposed to open, that because I was having relationship problems, that I had to teach for free for 2 weeks. No, that was the second time. No, the first time he called me at midnight. Excuse me. Right. And he called me and told me I'd get to the Dharma Center right away. I'm not kidding. This was the first time. I worked with the guy twice. And he called me. I'm like, yeah, what's going on, Frank? He's like, it's an emergency. You got to get over here. So I ride my bike over, to the Dharma Center real quick. And he's out there in his underwear running around the Dharma Center with burning stage, telling me if there was fairies trying to get into the Dharma Center.
Right. And you're the one with the concussive brain injuries.
Exactly.
Okay. So, maybe it's all made up. Maybe it's just like a, but one concussion too many, Scott.
Right. But he told me that, if I want to be part of the studio, that I need to do a teacher training. So 6 months into my practice, I joined a teacher training. And then I want to say it was probably 2 weeks into the teacher training, and Stephanie's mom unfortunately got sick in New York City, so she had to fly back. So all of a sudden I had to teach 15 some classes by myself because I was sort of mentoring underneath her, and I couldn't even touch my knees at the time. So it was quite the shock. But the Ashtanga thing, I want to say that was probably, I think, 22 years I've been teaching it now.
Wow.
Maybe longer.
Okay. So the majority of the time.
Yes. Huge majority.
For our listeners who aren't yogis and don't know, or maybe those who are and don't really understand, can you just maybe explain what exactly, what is Ashtanga, Mysore? Are they different? Are they the same? Like, what exactly is it? How did it start? How would you sort of, explain it to somebody who's a beginner?
Ashtanga literally means 8 limbs. So it encompasses all 8 limbs of yoga. Those limbs are, from the breathing practice, which is known as pranayama, to yamas, niyamas. It's just a bunch of different stuff. So the asana, which most people do, is the physical practice. Krishnamacharya. This is actually his system. He developed this system in Mysore, India. Well, I can't tell you the exact date, but he did it because Mysore was the last little spot in India that the British hadn't colonized or taken over. And so the Maharaja of Mysore, India, was sick at the time, and he was having these different yogis come and try to heal him. And Krishnamacharya came in and actually healed him. So he told him he wanted him to set up a school in the Mysore Palace, and wanted him to also train an army to fend off the British. So what he did is he came up with this Ashtanga system that we use today and created to make these guys sort of yoga warriors.
So basically,
the
sequence is, it's a super, super physical practice.
The first sequence, there's 3 major sequences. The first one's the primary series, which is all about cleansing the digestive system. So it's a lot of twisting and grounding, that sort of work. And then the second series is all about the nervous system, right? So it's like nerve cleansing, lots of back bends and that type of stuff. And then the third series is all about balance.
And so some of these questions I'm answering, I know the answers to, and some of them I don't, so I won't tell you which ones. There's these series, but my understanding is within the series, like in series 1, series 2, series 3, whoever is doing an Ashtanga practice is doing the same thing every day, meaning when you start, you go as far as you can go, basically. And you're doing the same thing as the person next to you. You may not start at the same time, but you're ultimately doing the same sequence of events or of moves, correct?
For a majority of the rule, I would say yes, correct. I think that everybody comes into the room has different sort of ailments going on. And sometimes when someone has an injury, like let's say it's a back-related injury or something, we will not have them start in the primary series. We'll actually have them start in the second series so that they can help strengthen front side of the body to take care of the back.
Right. But in theory.
Yeah, to a degree. But there's also recipe, which is basically where some people take some of the stuff from the first series, right, and some of the stuff from the second, some of the stuff from the third, to sort of create this sort of balance or cross training, I guess you could say in yoga.
I don't know how far you want to get into this, but amongst Ashtanga, there's different ways Ashtanga is taught.
Oh, no, we're going into this. Deep dive, definitely.
What he was talking about, Krishnamacharya, right? So he was the teacher of, now this is kind of fascinating, not just Pattabhi Jois who helped develop this system, but also Iyengar, right? So those are like the 2 real big systems that all the vinyasa stuff is coming off of. Now, so Pattabhi Jois develops this, they get this very physical system going, and he ends up leaving the legacy, I don't know how you'd say it, but like his school, it was left to not his son, but his grandson. So his name is Sharad, and he teaches a very militant version of this. So that it's like you're always going to pretty much be doing the same thing. If you can't get into a posture, you stay at that posture until your body opens up and you're able to do it. And then you get the next posture. So that's kind of how that school works. Not always, but it's pretty regimented. Manju Joyce, who is Pattabhi Joyce's son, teaches very differently. So it's more like you try the posture, you see how it goes, you get into it, you don't. Maybe you skip it if it hurts. Maybe you don't get all the way into the deepest expression. It doesn't stop you. You just keep going. And if you learn it, you keep practicing as much as you want to practice. So it's a lot more of a self-sufficient practice. Like you don't have the teacher telling you what to do quite as much as you would at their school.
And the first way is more rigid, where like you said, if you can't get past a certain or get into or properly do a certain pose, you are basically paused at that point for days, weeks, months, years until you can finally master it. And then you move to the next. Whereas the second one, there's a little more leeway with maybe, getting it good enough. And then over time, it'll get better, but you do it, go past it, correct?
Yeah, because the way, and we've seen it happen, people will go further into the series, then they'll come back to the pose they were struggling with, and then it's no problem. This is the one of the things. So in the stricter school, you're not supposed to go into second series until you can drop back. So basically you're standing up, you drop back into a back bend, and then you stand back up. Like that's sort of the gateway to second series. So all of these people that I was telling you had all these breakthroughs on Zoom, they've all been doing the second series for probably 2 years about. So they've been doing other postures and now they're all able to do.
I see. And so that's the method that you guys do, the more lenient one, I guess I would call it?
I would call it more liberal.
Liberal. Okay, that's fair.
The thing that happened in Mysore, India is that at first these guys went there and Pattabhi Joyce gave them everything. He didn't hold them back from any of the poses. He just let them go. But there was only 4 or 5 people in his, shala at the time.
Right.
But then as it gained popularity and all of a sudden he had, hundreds of people coming into the shala every day, he had to figure out ways to stop people so that he could teach, keep up with the numbers that were coming in. And that's where he came up with this method of if you can't bind in rigidity, you're stuck there so you can bind. And he knew that would shorten their practice by, over an hour. When
Americans first came there, if you talk to them about they would have a 2-hour practice in the morning and then a 2-hour practice at night. I mean, they were kids, they were like 19.
But they went through the whole.
But they were learning the whole system, very quickly. Yeah.
Right. And these two sort of philosophies, these two, I guess are they called gurus or what are they called? The people who run these now. That's a
whole nother conversation.
There's like a whole, and there's a lot of stuff going on there, right?
I'm gonna quote what Manju said to me once. I asked him about the gurus, and he goes basically, if someone calls himself a guru, run away. They're crazy. Quote unquote, Manju said.
Who's the fellow that you guys went to Chicago and dragged my wife, or she dragged you? Someone dragged somebody to Chicago for 3 days to train to practice with him.
That's Manju.
Right. He seemed to have a big smile on his face, at least in the selfies y'all took.
Yeah,
he is. That's great.
He's really fun. I would describe his method of teaching is like he gives you a playground, and these postures, these asanas are your toys to learn about yourself. It's very free. It's very fun, and no, he doesn't like to be referred to as a guru.
That's
stuff.
Yeah. Shurat. So the other one, the one that's in play right now. But yeah, he actually refers to himself as like the ultimate guru, which is kind of part of their culture. So it's not out of nowhere.
It's different ways to look at this. It's not, different people have different angles, and that's fine. And so Ashtanga, so what is at least in your sense, because you guys both, you both practice this, you both teach it, you both, you're in this world every day. What would you say is the big advantage or upside to doing a practice like Ashtanga for someone who's either already into yoga or starting yoga? Like what are the selling points of it compared to just, going to classes and, which are sort of more mixed and varied in what people do and what order they do it in?
The system has been around for quite a while, and it works. And what I mean by this is if you come into this practice and you actually start studying it and listening to your body and allowing your body to sort of open up, it works. It heals people. And I've seen.
It's not just on a physical level. I think there's something to, even with what we said about we give a lot of freedom to people to not oh, you have to be stuck in this posture, you can't move on. I mean, we definitely are like, skip it, but you still have this sequence, even if you're skipping things that you're working with. So you're coming to your mat and you're facing these things and you're facing your reaction to these things on pretty much, even if it's not a daily basis. Let's say you did it 3 times a week. It's not a teacher telling you what to do. Not that I don't like these classes, right? But when there's music playing and someone's directing you, you can kind of lose yourself in the movement, which is a nice experience in itself. But when you come to the mat in Ashtanga, you are really, facing your stuff.
Yeah. There's times where, like, Jamie would be practicing.
Go ahead, you can throw me
Okay.
a bus there.
And I have her baby who was, an infant at the time in the other room, napping her. And all of a sudden I hear her yelling and throwing things and all this stuff. And after a while, it gets really quiet. And I get this picture of her in this beautiful background. So it's definitely, the practice doesn't let you hide stuff.
It's like what they say is like your emotions from your past, right? Things that have happened to you throughout your life tend to get stored in the physical body. So for you to get past that stuff is you have to let it out. You have to let it go. You can skip the pose and I think that's what's kind of fun about the Ashtanga this way. Like I could just skip it or I can face it and I can see what happens if I go there.
I don't know who told me this once before. I don't know if it was an actual doctor or not, but told me that the human body is very memory oriented. So when you go through like traumatic experiences in your life, and you start to release those certain muscle groups, that sort of emotion comes back up as you sort of go.
Which you see a lot in both back bends and I would say in like deep hip openers.
Yeah. You can talk to your wife about it too. I mean, there's definitely like really good days and there are also really bad days in practice, but without the bad days, we wouldn't have good days. So.
Right. And what would be, let's say, either a disadvantage or a challenge, for Ashtanga, like in terms, you said, doing it multiple days a week. Like if someone only had 1 day a week as Ashtanga, just like they're not going to get it? Or is certain types of body types, or is there like who might not be a good candidate to be practicing Ashtanga?
I used to have that sort of belief that, Ashtanga Yoga wasn't for everyone. And then I had different students that came in who were, I'm going to use the word broken, they're like really beat up. And I was just like, wow, how am I going to fix these guys? Or how am I going to help them fix themselves, I should say. And it worked. And then every time I thought I'd seen like the most broken down person, someone else would show up.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
and there's a lot of people like in their 70s and 80s that do it. I mean, it's not, this is a Manju quote. He said, Ashtanga Yoga, this isn't correct. But basically he's like, it's a beautiful practice. What you do with it might not be so beautiful. Right?
I mean,
because you're the one who's taking responsibility.
Right. It's like trying to play Mozart. You may not be good at it, but it's a beautiful song. Yeah.
But it's not even like, it's not good at it in the way of like it looks pretty. It's how Ashtanga is a breathing, or the practice that we're doing on the mat, right? It's really a breathing practice. It looks crazy. There's all this other stuff going on, but it's about the breath and staying focused on the breath and keeping the breath even and steady. So when it becomes about anything else, which it does all the time, right? You're losing the essence of the practice. You're always wanting to come back to the breath. And when you do, it's simple. And
it's such an interesting place also. I mean, because if you spend time in yoga studios or, places that do yoga, there's obviously, there's basically like three types, taking meditation rooms aside, there's basically 3 types of spaces. There's either a place where you just sort of see people doing stuff on their own, like they found an empty room or whatever. Then you find the classes, like you said, either with music, without music, where people are doing sort of, instructed, like, okay, everyone do this. And obviously people do it to different degrees and better and worse and, more advanced, less advanced. Okay. And then the Ashtanga room, it's not a class. Like you said, it's an open practice. It's basically like studio painting. Like everyone's sort of, even though they're doing the same series and sequence, they start at different times, they go at different speeds potentially, they're at different levels or different ages. And it's usually very quiet, usually, other than if I'm in the room and you just hear a lot of like groaning and falling and things of that sort, those types of noises. What one of the things that, Michal said to me, she goes, "This is where all the real yogis are." Like she's like, "We're all the really, really good people at yoga, and they're all in that room. They gravitate towards Ashtanga because it's quite advanced, or can be quite advanced."
Yes, it can be. It can be, and I think it's a very physical practice. So I think it attracts, people who want that.
Yeah, I mean, I did yoga for years, like years and years before I came to Ashtanga, and what brought me into it was that I was like, well, how do you do all that? How do you do the crazy stuff? And I've been in it for 6 years now, and I can do some crazy, crazy things.
But Nate, there's also was a growing trend, sadly, not sadly, there was a growing trend, but, we closed as it was starting to boom, but we were getting a lot of, elderly people coming into the room.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, and watching those guys slowly start to grow and stuff, it was really, really cool to see. So we had, people who were doing, standing up, coming up, standing with their foot behind the head, people that were just basically folding over. It's just a lot, a large variety of people.
Well, and seeing the different reactions, like from somebody who comes in who's, like we said, like 70 or 80, who comes in, does a couple of sun salutations, maybe a modified standing, a few seated poses, and closes, and they're just smiling through the entire thing. They come in smiling, they're so happy to be moving, and then you have these people doing, upside down, foot behind their head stuff. So yeah, but they're like,
for the older, they can come into a room and they know it's safe.
Yeah,
they don't have to
know what to do. Yeah. No, I just know, like, that's more advanced.
Yeah.
The people who are struggling to put their foot behind their head.
Yeah.
Their practices are much more, the contentment that they have is
absolutely
much more advanced.
Well, yeah, and it's also it's they have, typically as people get older, they have a lot more discipline. So sometimes when people are younger, maybe they don't like to do the same thing every day and they want to mix it up and whatnot. And so as you get older, you get more, you're more comfortable with sort of regiments and discipline. And also, like you said, you go into a class, you don't know what to expect. 50% of the stuff they're doing in the class, they may feel like out of sorts. Like if I do this, I'm gonna, break my neck. And so if they're going through the same series, they know what they can do and where they are, and it's a little bit more predictable for them what's going to happen. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Why it would attract people in that age group.
You have a question, you just call the teacher over.
Yeah, you get a lot of attention.
Keep going, and it stops for you.
I think all that's the advantage for Ashtanga Yoga is all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And how many in that room? There's typically how many teacher instructor types? Is it 1, 2, 3? How many are usually in the room at a time?
You mean my assistant?
Yeah.
It would depend on the day of the week, but for the most part, there's always at least 2 people in the room.
Right, based on how crowded it is, and you do it starting early in the morning. It goes all morning, right?
Yeah. It would go basically from 6 to 11.
Yeah.
And then right around 9:15, 9:30, there's always me and at least 2 other assistants, sometimes 3.
Because it would explode
in there. Room, you get 30, 40 people crammed into that room at the same time doing their own thing.
Which really just becomes like crowd control and safety issues at that point. Like there is a point where there were so many people in the room that you just have to make sure no one's like kicking each other.
Right. I mean, I know it starts at 6, but for some reason, Michal's in there at like 4:30 in the morning. So I don't know how that works. I think they gave her a key.
What was amazing is she would come in. I mean, it was very talk about discipline. She would come in.
Oh, she's hardcore. Yeah, I can't compete with her.
Second the studio opened, but she was spending that alone time, doing her sun salutations, doing her, the stuff that is really, it's good to be doing on your own because you're really connecting to yourself. And what was cool about what she did is then by the time the teacher walked in, she was at the postures where she needed assistance. I remember her I was teaching a 6 a.m. hot class right before she like dove into Ashtanga. And I remember her taking it and exactly where she was. And like I could like feel her being like, I was like, she's going to be one of us.
Or maybe you like you did like Jedi mind tricks on her. You will come to Ashtanga.
I didn't.
You will love Ashtanga. I will love Ashtanga. You will wake up at 3 a.m. and be in the studio before the lights turn on. So, wow. Do you guys still teach any other types of yoga? Do you guys ever do classes like vinyasa classes or whatever?
We're still doing. We're doing them on Zoom as well. But yeah, we have like basic classes. Like we have one tonight at 6, and then we do
vinyasa. He was teaching. He has a very successful, like hot
power yoga.
Yeah, he just turns the music up and shouts the poses out.
Because I mean, everything you described about your Ashtanga practice is all true. But I mean, before I ever walked in an Ashtanga room, I just knew you were the guy with like the Grateful Dead T-shirt playing like Zeppelin and and teaching yoga class. Like I was like, that's the Ashtanga guy. And he was like, yeah, that's him. I was like, oh, he's.
What he did with the hot stuff, I think, was pretty genius and based off of Ashtanga, really. He kept the sequences exact. So let's say his old Monday night class, which used to be like when we first met, I mean, that class you had to have the tiles. At Pure Yoga, when the classes would sell out, you had to have like tiles so that, no, you wouldn't sneak into the class because it was that packed. So, and I remember the first one I took, the lights are dark, the music is super loud, and your first one, you don't know what it is. Everyone in the room knew exactly what they were doing. It was like a choreographed dance. And I'm like, what is this? And it's because he teaches, even though it's not an Ashtanga sequence, but he would teach the same sequence every week in those specific classes.
Right.
So people would memorize it, and then it became, it's that same idea. You're like losing yourself in your sequence.
Right. Julia does the same thing. Her class is like that also, with the music, and it's a lot. There's a lot of overlap with Ashtanga, and it's the same pretty much when you go to her class. You know what to expect. So there is that predictability aspect to it. I guess maybe that's that's one of the, and also it's the right time of day for me. But so do you guys do any other exercise besides yoga? I know, Scott, you were mountain biking until it ruined your brain. But are you doing anything else?
I've done 5 New York City marathons.
Right. Oh, that's right. You guys are runners. Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, in Chicago. Yeah. So I try to do, it's hard because we're not doing the marathon this year, but I tried to raise money for Fred's team every year to help Sloan's Kettering on. I mean, we did last time we did it was how much?
It was close to
$80,000. And then, we're going to do it this year again. And then Jamie's brother, Todd, cancer, at a very young age. He has stage 4, lung cancer.
Yeah, he's doing okay. He's on the pill, but he's there. So we actually already raised over $30,000 for it.
Yeah, we signed up for the marathon with him. They were planning on walking it.
Still walking.
So we've raised a lot of money already for that as well. But that was just sort of my way of giving back. Weird how it all came back around for a family.
Have you been running at all, or just not because of this?
Yeah, I have been running. I just started up
a month ago.
Yeah, a month ago. When the numbers started getting better, I felt more comfortable going out. So.
Got it. Wow. And Jamie, you're also running, or you were?
I don't really like anything but yoga. I do it reluctantly. I'm walking with my brother right now because he still wants to do it. So I'm doing it. I just tend to get strong quickly. So I like being flexible. So my muscles, when I do too many other activities, like I strengthen up very fast. So I prefer to just stick to the yoga, but I'm happy to do it with him.
Got it. Got it. So I wanted to, this is all, it's so fascinating. One of the things I've really enjoyed about doing these podcasts and speaking to different, yogis and instructors, and just how many different angles there are to come to yoga and to practice it and what people get out of it. And it's just so varied. And that's why I'm one of the, a big proponent of it for that reason. That I like you said, Ashtanga's for everyone. I mean, all the more so yoga's for everyone. There's just so many opportunities to do it. But one of the other things that I've been asking people is, you guys have been in this world for, 20 plus years, and you've seen so many people come through, and you've learned your own. What is yoga, or if you want to say specifically Ashtanga yoga, taught you? I'm going to ask you a few things, but first about people, your understanding of other people.
It's really interesting to get to know someone on an energetic level in a classroom, as opposed to more of a, what do I want to say, like a friendship type thing. You don't realize, what the individual, you don't know who or where this person has come from or what they've gone through. And so you're working with them, and you're trying to be very, careful about certain things because you don't want them to basically have a meltdown in your room. So I think it's taught me to not be as, I want to say, judgmental. I don't look at someone and say, oh, they're just, they're an upper class, whatever, Upper West Side, it's almost like grounding.
It puts everybody on the same
level
playing field, right? Because it's like we all have different kinds of trauma, really. So when you're coming into a room and you're all moving and breathing, stuff is going to come out. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your background is. Like, we all have stuff. And I think one thing that Ashtanga, even with all the other yoga experience I had, what Ashtanga taught me and what impresses me about watching others is the faith, the faith to keep going.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like, for that, yoga was a little bit more, I definitely felt a release. I definitely felt the physical sort of, like what I said, things being released in my body and feeling lighter and feeling freer. But there was something about really coming back and facing the same sequence with the same group of people and like watching them do the same thing that is just incredibly motivating. And I don't even know. I mean, I guess you could say spiritual. I mean, it's beyond. It's
cool.
It's beyond words, really. It's just like, it makes me excited to wake up every day. So
yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, you see so many different people who you would think are very different, and everyone is different, obviously, and comes from different places. But like you said, sort of they all show up at the same starting line, and they're all going through, particularly with Ashtanga, the same sequence, and they're doing the same things and having the same, challenges and struggles as the person next to them. And that it's just unifying. It sort of brings people together. It's one of the nice things also, I think, Ashtanga, you go into Ashtanga, studio. I mean, like you said, there's some differences, but almost anywhere in the world, it's going to be pretty similar.
It is.
True.
That's the beauty behind it. But, and Nate, the other thing that I really, really emphasize heavily in my teacher trainings and stuff is I always tell, my teacher trainings, who I end up being my assistants and stuff, is never put yourself up on a pedestal. Always be the student. You can learn from other people as much as you can learn from you. So if you listen, you watch people, they'll actually teach you to be a better teacher yourself.
Wow. And so I was going to ask you, what has all this taught you about yourselves, turning it inwards?
I would say Ashtanga Yoga taught me that I am much stronger than I ever thought before I came to Ashtanga Yoga. I am much more capable. I am much more, I mean, when I first started, Scott was like, "Oh, you're going to teach," like very soon when I walked in. And I was like, I had been through a teacher training before. I dropped out halfway through. Yoga was already my private, happy place. What Ashtanga let me do was share it with other people, or, that room allowed me to feel safe and strong enough to look at somebody else and be like, "No, you can do it. Come on, we're all going to do it together."
It's more personal if you can sit next to someone, you're not facing the entire class.
Yeah, but now I can face an entire class too. I mean, I think it just really helped me come out of, I mean, I know you were saying internal, but it really actually helped me come out of my shell and be able to serve other people in a way that I wanted to, but I just wasn't capable of before.
That's really cool. That's great.
I don't know. I give Scott some credit for that. I don't know if it was all Ashtanga. It's too.
Yeah, no, it's definitely Scott's concussions led to all of this.
True. Yeah.
Amazing.
Truth is, I mean, for me, I had such a big ego when I first started teaching and practicing yoga, just from being, a competitive racer, that it taught me how to let go of that sort of, I'm the best, I'm going to be the best, I can do this. Now I'm just like okay with where I am. It doesn't really affect me whether I can do a posture that I did, 10, 15 years ago anymore. I'm just happy with where I am. Yeah.
It's amazing. Wow. What great lessons.
I would do all of them and laugh at me.
It's all good. Well, thank you so much for this time and for, talking about, yourselves and Ashtanga and, your experience with it. It is a really cool practice, advanced in the sense that you can go as far as you want, but it's for beginners also. I'm living proof of that because I was able to go in there and, survive, and I'm on the beginner end of things. I know you guys are doing it online. Hopefully one day it'll be in person again. You guys were at Pure Yoga in their Ashtanga open practice room. And if people, are looking for either a new way to do yoga or new to yoga itself, or they've been doing Ashtanga but want to, try with some experts, Jamie and Scott Harig are amazing. And thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Nate.
It was fun.
Thank you for listening to the Healthful Woman Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, please visit our website at www.healthfulwoman.com. That's HEALTHFULWOMAN.com. If you have any questions about this podcast or any other topic you would like us to address, please feel free to email us at hw@healthfulwoman.com. Have a great day. The information discussed in Healthful Woman is intended for educational uses only and does not replace medical care from your physician. Healthful Woman is meant to expand your knowledge of women's health and does not replace ongoing care from your regular physician or gynecologist. We encourage you to speak with your doctor about specific diagnoses and treatment options for an effective treatment plan.